It is time for UFC 261 live for lock right here on Awesemo.com. Of course, I am Jason Floyd. As always, I am joined by the fighter, Pete Rogers Jr. as we're here to break down UFC 261 just under 2 hours until we hit lock for those early prelims on ESPN Plus, and then, of course, those TV prelims, and then that main card on pay-per-view, headlined by 3 title fights. Pete, how you doing here on this Saturday, man?
What is up, everybody? It is fight day. Happy fight day, everybody. Here to make some money, talk about some beautiful fights. We got 3 title fights. I'm excited. Seems like a lot of people are interested to this card, and for a good reason, right? Like, this seems like it's a very nice card and, a solid pay-per-view card. And we haven't really had a true solid pay-per-view card, it feels like, in quite some time.
Yeah, of course, I appreciate everyone that's in here on a Saturday afternoon. Of course, be sure to hit that like button. If you are not subscribed to Awesemo, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We got a ton of content for you each and every day. Of course, after us will be the Boss Man is coming up after us for NBA Deeper Dive to get you ready for tonight's NBA slate, as I believe Spags is with them there on the first part of it. And then it's live before lock after that. But of course, we are here to talk UFC 261. I was in our office channel Slack a little earlier, Pete, and of course, we're here obviously to talk a little bit of strategy, roster construction, and I'll tell you, when I was putting together my lineups, I went with a single bold on FanDuel. FanDuel's a tough construction today. I really wanted to get to Kamaru Usman. DraftKings, I've got a little bit of everyone. There's certain fighters that I'm looking at, and you mentioned this guy on the strategy show on Thursday. Randy Brown, I think, is a guy who potentially could be that slate breaker just because of what we're seeing on ownership.
Yeah, don't you love it when I get a FanDuel question? I'm like, yeah, Jason can take over. Jason's the FanDuel guy. Talk to him. You're experienced over on that site. I mean, I can give my analysis for sure, but that's your sweet spot over there on FanDuel. But for DraftKings, for me, like, it's about prioritizing 1, if not 2 title fights in your lineups, right? And then obviously hitting on an underdog in the title fight, but selecting groups. So for me, it was like making sure I had the right fights in my lineups, the fights that like scream GPP to me. The Randy Brown and Cowboy Oliveira fight, the Uriah Hall, the Chris Weidman fight, even that Kevin Natividad and Batgarel fight. Like, that seems like a sneaky fight. But the one that really sticks out to me is that Carl Roberson and Brent Allen fight. Like, all of those fights I mentioned seem to be like GPP fights, and I set groups based around that. Like, I maximize exposure to certain fighters, limited exposure to others, and then try to get different and have the right correlation between the rest.
Yeah, someone had asked me, it was taking 1 out of 3, Weidman, Molina, or Roberson. And my thought was, I thought Molina was the safer play than the other 2. I think Roberson has the highest upside out of the 3. Weidman is a crapshoot to me. And the reason he's a crapshoot to me is first full camp at Upstate Karate there in South Carolina, now lives in South Carolina. Of course, that's a gym of Ray Thompson and Steven Thompson. And it's just like, if you tell me Chris Weidman's going the wrestling route, okay, I'm all about Chris Weidman. But the one thing about this matchup, Uriah Hall has wanted this rematch for 11 years.
Yeah.
Like, I was listening to this video, Chael Sonnen was talking about it when he was fighting Anderson Silva back in the day, and Uriah Hall is going to the Ultimate Fighter, and everyone was talking about Uriah Hall, Anderson Silva, and he goes, that's not the fight Uriah Hall was talking to me about. He goes, his whole mindset was Chris Weidman. He wanted that fight back.
Yeah, I mean, it leaves a sour taste in your mouth whenever you lose to somebody, especially if you're competitive, right? Like, not too many people are like, you're not going to accept a loss a lot. Like, obviously, like, yeah, okay, they were the better man that night or better woman that night. They got the best of me, but you want to run it back. Like, I know I can beat you, so I'm going to run it back. And I don't blame Uriah Hall, because in my losses in my professional career and even in my amateur career, like, I want to run those back. Like, I feel like, you may have got me on the right night, but I can perform better. And I'm sure Uriah Hall thinks the same thing. But let's be clear. I think Uriah Hall needs to keep this fight on the feet. And Chris Weidman in interviews has talked about how he's a bad matchup for a lot of the top guys within the division. Well, guess what? You're only a bad matchup against those guys if you use wrestling. If you strike, then you're a sit and duck and you're going to get knocked out just like you have been several times. And I do think Chris Weidman at this point of his career has recognized that, right? Like, don't strike with these strikers. Like, just use it just enough to get inside and to implement some takedowns. So in those 3 fighters you mentioned, like Carl Roberson fighting a guy in Brent Allen who is a legitimate grappling threat and will probably outclass Roberson on the mat. But Brent Allen's just coming off a knockout defeat, and Carl Roberson cracks. Like, and he's been training with Corey Anderson a lot. So I really like that. That does give me some confidence with him. But, Chris Weidman has so much grappling potential. We talk about it. If you have grappling potential on DraftKings, then, you have my attention. I need to get exposure.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Now, of course, we have free premium data and tools today over at Awesemo.com, which does include MMA fighter rankings, also NBA player rankings, NHL player and stack rankings, and MLB player rankings. So be sure to check out those free premium tools and data that we have over at Awesemo.com. And I'm going to get right into this. We want to get right into the questions. We want to interact with you here as we're here for the next 50 minutes or so. Brad going, I'm thinking Andraj has a real chance to make the belt change hands. And so Andraj is somebody that got asked to me earlier today, and this is my general thought. I prefer Jessica Andraj as a cash play. I do believe, I mean, look, we talked about the strategy show. Her, was it 6.38 strikes landed per minute of fighting? That's something that absolutely sticks out to you. But we've seen Shevchenko go more to the grappling route as of late. So I do think she's going to have to stop some takedowns to keep this fight on the feet. I prefer Andraj more as a cash play than a GPP play.
I mean, I like a lot of the underdogs in the title fights compared to some of the 7K options or even some of the 6K options. I will say that Andraj has potential to break her salary, right? Like, she's so cheap. And if this fight is competitive at all, she'll probably, excel in that salary spot because of her volume and her takedowns. But for me, like, I'm taking a stance today on Shevchenko. I really like Shevchenko. I think that she's, I've watched a lot of her sparring, a lot of her footage behind the scenes, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. The girl is so aggressive. And whenever you have a bull coming at you like that, I think that a fighter like Shevchenko can really capitalize and maybe explode with like a big performance, like a Kamaru Usman type of total. So I have plenty of Shevchenko, but I don't hate the Andraj call because of the power and the takedowns.
Great comment from Jared Neal in the chat where he says, if you think Usman is going to win, he's a must play on DraftKings. I agree with that sentiment because, I mean, like, look, I expect a 25-minute Kamaru Usman decision. And I don't believe him when he says he's going to sit there and have a striking match with Jorge Masvidal. That's not a smart game plan. And he has got a great game plan head coach in Trevor Whitman. So do I expect him to engage in striking with Masvidal? Yes, but I do not expect that's going to be a core of his game plan. To me, his game plan is going to be about taking this fight to the ground, getting this fight up against a fence, and wearing down Jorge Masvidal. I think that if Jorge Masvidal is going to pull off the upset, it will come early, not late. And to me, Usman is a guy, and we've seen this throughout time, Pete. This guy breaks the slate every time he fights because of his volume and his takedowns.
Yeah, I do love Usman today. It's just like I am expecting a better performance from Jorge Masvidal. Maybe he's able to not necessarily defend so many takedowns, but avoid getting clinched against the cage. And this is more of a striking match for, let's say, 1 or 2 rounds than it was predominantly against the cage or in the grappling realm. I'm still expecting Kamaru Usman to, do fine. But for like a third of my lineups, or probably like a quarter of my lineups, I avoided the main event, A, to get different, and B, what happens if Masvidal wins 2 rounds or even is performing better than we expect. Then maybe a fighter that's a little cheaper in Shevchenko can have a more dominant performance and perhaps excel in that salary spot.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just I've got a lot of. I think I ended up about 60% Kamaru Usman, so I pretty much figured that I'm going to be with the field there. Over in Slack, Boss Bro says, "What's the value on FanDuel? I'm thinking Selikic or Connolly. Which would you prefer?" Tristan Connolly, I think if he does win, I mean, now fighting down, going down weight classes here, and first fight, after coming off that injury, question marks there. I mean, if you're going that low, I might just take the shot on Stefan.
Yeah, I agree. Did you see Tristan Connolly yesterday at the weigh-ins? Like, ultimate sucked out, looked like, a bag of bones out there. And, he took a short notice fight against Michelle Bahia at 170 pounds. But the fact, like, he's now at featherweight, man, he looked tough on that scale. Like, I don't know how he's going to be over the duration of, say, 3 rounds. He could be fine, but on the scales, I was, like, a little worried about him.
Question also from Slack says, seem to be a weekly question now. Some good super draft plays. Should we get all 3 title fights or 2 multiple entries? Look, on super draft, you have to prioritize those title fights. You just have to. I think that, and we talked about this on Thursday, is I think we talk about if someone's playing all 3 title fights, I think the popular combination is going to be Usman, Rose, and Shevchenko. I do think going the Weili Zhang route is going to help separate your field. It's going to be very interesting to see what her ultimate ownership comes in, especially in that big DraftKings GPP, because I just feel like so many people are just going to look at the value of Rose. And you brought this great point about her on the strategy show is, I think if you want to be a Rose backer, your hope is that she does try to utilize the grappling aspect.
Yeah, like I like Rose Namajunas a lot. I'm overexposed on Rose Namajunas, mainly because of the value. And, I know that she can perform at a championship level, how she looked against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And Weili Zhang has been tested in the UFC for sure. But I want to see her overcome some adversity, get tested in the grappling realm. I think that Rose doesn't have to take her down, but I think she can solidify rounds by doing so, potentially work towards taking her back, implementing some slick jiu-jitsu. I like it. I just think like she checks so many boxes, and at her price, it's an attractive price for sure.
I would say someone on Super Draft that I think is a solid play is you at a 1.1 multiplier, 1.65. That fight to me, Pete, feels like it is such a showcase fight for him, taking on Vargas. Vargas is going to probably be, if not the lowest owned fighter, probably the next lowest owned fighter. I just think that's a question mark with him. And people were asked about this in Slack earlier. I don't, to me, he's a striker. He knows what he does well. Talking to some people on a scouting report with him, they said, look, he does have wrestling, but he's a striker. He's going to play distance. He could, he's going to have to likely defend takedowns in this spot. But to me, this just screams of a showcase fight matchup by the UFC.
It does. I think that Zhu Rong is interesting for sure. It's just the price point in his UFC debut. Obviously, like, I'm worried about what happens if he doesn't pay off that price point. There are so many unknowns, especially when you have international talent coming into the UFC. That's always something, right? Like, level of competition is quite different internationally compared to within the United States. But I do think that Rodrigo Vargas, he's like I said, he's kind of just there. He's present in the fight. I think that he's a tough guy, so he probably will be tough to put away. But, 2 fights in the UFC, 0-2, threw an illegal knee against Brock Weaver. Before that was in Combate America. So he hasn't had the most success in the United States as well. For me, like, I have exposure to Rong Zhu, but Rodrigo Vargas is one of my lowest owned fighters out there.
Garrett Wilson brings up an interesting question, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are probably maybe having this idea as well about Rose or Masvidal as a GPP on FanDuel. Let me look at the Masvidal side of that equation first. Jorge Masvidal he stopped 11 takedowns in the first matchup against Usman. So that in the FanDuel side of it, that's got to be an aspect of, if you believe it's a 25-minute fight, which that's what I believe, you have to imagine that Masvidal is going to be able to get some points there on takedown defenses. I think then it becomes a question of how many strikes can Jorge Masvidal land. I think Rose is the safer option in terms of playing her on FanDuel, but there is a nice potential there for Jorge Masvidal.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Jorge Masvidal has a chance to win rounds. Obviously, he can knock out Kamaru Usman here, and a lot of people are rooting for that to happen. But in the matchup, Kamaru Usman, if you look at the stats, only has a 47% takedown accuracy rating, which is actually surprisingly low. Like, I thought that whenever he decided to dictate the fight and grapple his opponents, that he just takes him down no matter what. 47%, it's like just under average. And I will say that he uses it to rest. So like if he fails on a takedown attempt, he will keep him against the cage and hit him with some strikes, but a lot of them aren't significant. And Jorge Masvidal was able to stuff several takedowns in on 5 days notice or whatever it was. So I do have confidence that he can stuff the same, if not even a little bit more, but I still favor Kamaru Usman over the duration of five rounds.
Yeah. Of course, today is the last day of our promo that's going on for UFC 261, as you get 50% off and also plus MMA monthly pass. That's only $14.98. And if you get that today, that's going to get you for 5 cards that are coming up. Tonight's UFC pay-per-view, plus you also got 3 fight night cards coming up in the month of May, plus the pay-per-view. So great time to take advantage of that deal. You can get ownership projections. You can get player projections, that top fighters tool, which is a great tool to use. And of course, be sure to add Fantasy Cruncher to your account. You do got to use that promo code UFC 261. You see it there on the screen of all the cards that are coming up over the next 30 days, 5 cards in the next 30 days. So be sure to take advantage of that promo. You got to use that promo code UFC 261, and that does expire today. So be sure to take advantage of that. Let's move on to some other questions that I'm seeing right now in the chat. Of course, if you do have any questions, be sure to line those up. GQ saying, FanDuel is rough, man. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough over there today. In terms of, when you look at it's very clear who are going to be the popular plays when it comes to MVP. I mean, look, I think if you go away from the title fights in the MVP, you're going to put yourself in a unique position. Someone brought up a name that, Pete, I know you are liking this fighter. Carnelossi in the first fight of the night mentioned as a very sneaky MVP. And I was like, yeah. I said, the problem is if you take someone not named Kamaru Usman in the MVP, you might be sweating those last 25 minutes out.
Yeah, I think Usman or Shevchenko make a lot of sense in that spot, but Carnelossi is a fighter that I really like, and I understand that from a stature aspect. She looks like a smaller fighter compared to Liang Na, but Liang Na is not going to be as physical as Carnelossi, and a lot of the time in Liang Na's fights, she is the superior grappler. So when she decides to take people down or start working towards attempting to submit them, she has a lot of success. Now, I think she's going to be met with a lot of resistance here against Ariane Carnelossi, who is like a little tank. She looks like a Jessica Andraj, like mini, and the girl is super skilled. It's the first fight of the night, so that's traditionally a volatile spot. So be careful here. Liang Na has the potential to have an armbar from guard because she's a submission specialist for sure. But I really don't foresee that happening against a black belt in Ariane Carnelossi, who is also a pretty good striker. On FanDuel, it makes a ton of sense because Liang Na is going to get desperate and start to shoot for her life at moments of the fight. And I think that Carnelossi can rack up tons of takedowns defended, punish her, and capitalize on any mistakes.
Teddy brought up a question about 20 max DraftKings entry. How many title fights? I'm in a 20 max. I will tell you, I was looking at 1 or 2 title fights in all of my lineups.
I think you have to have one. I think you have to have one. And what I would do is for a 20 max, right? I would do 5 of my lineups with just one of them. The fighter in the championship fight that you feel the most confident. I would do 5 lineups with 2 of them. And then after that, then you can maybe start to get a little different and a little unique. I mean, if you want to be as safe as they come and you think that a lot of these championship fights are going to go the distance or into the championship rounds, then you roster all 3, right? Like, it's a no-brainer. There's so much value on the slate, especially for the underdogs. A fighter like Rose Namajunas, I think, is going to be very popular, especially because she was a former champion.
Here's another point to bring up, and I forgot to bring this up on the strategy show on Thursday. Big note about tonight's fights. It's in the big cage, not the small cage that you're used to seeing at the UFC Apex. So this is a 30-footer. And while 5 feet does not sound like a lot, it is a drastic amount of difference between these two cages. So something to think about there. Also, you know, Waylon Smith brings up, he says, Usman will tire Masvidal out in the first and then strike him if he does that at all. Why is everyone questioning Jorge Masvidal's cardio?
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a vet. And
I feel like it's, you know, when you take a fight on 7 days notice and you got to fly across the world to make weight where you're cutting excess, I think he cut close to 30 pounds to make weight. Of course, that's going to take a hit on your cardio. He's had a full camp to get ready for this. I've seen people talk about this narrative and I'm like, what evidence outside of taking a fight on 7 days have you said Jorge Masvidal's got questionable cardio?
Yeah, I mean, the guy has nearly 50 fights. Took the fight on 5 days notice, cut over 25 pounds. Maybe he didn't look the best that he should have, but I think that he's going to look better, you know, in this next fight. I really do. And, he, you know, from the weigh-in, he only had 7 pounds to cut. So it sounds like he had a great camp. If you look at him on a scale, he looked awesome.
Yeah, I really think that I have a feeling that calf kicks is probably going to be something that Masvidal tries to implement in this game. It'll be interesting to see whether or not he's able to do that or not. Another question we have says, who does everyone have in the Rose fight? Kind of surprised she's a big underdog. I'm not surprised that she's a underdog in this matchup. I think that the question I have ultimately with Rose is what happens if Wei Li is able to bully her in this matchup?
Yeah, I think if she gets bullied in periods of this fight, she will resort to her takedowns there. You know, I think that it's just an interesting fight. I think the big cage can help a fighter who's a sniper on the outside, which is why, like, even in Shevchenko against Jessica Andraj, if it was the smaller cage, obviously I would be worried about Andraj replicating what Jennifer Maia did in periods of the fight. So I like Shevchenko on the outside. I like Namajunas on the outside. But, I mean, if you're there's nothing bad with rostering Weili Zhang. I mean, the girl is phenomenal.
GQ asking about Molina or Roberson for a FanDuel GPP. I think we got to think about this one here a little bit, Pete, because, you know, we talked about Roberson as a FanDuel play a little earlier. You got to think about if he does win this fight, you have to imagine that he's going to stop some takedowns from Brent Allen. You know, my thought in Brent Allen is he's going to be looking to get this fight to the ground, look for a submission. So I think in terms of comparing him versus Molina, I think Roberson has a higher upside, but I believe Molina has a higher percentage of winning the fight.
Yeah, so I don't have a problem with the Molina fight at all. I just view it as a flyweight contest that will be competitive because I don't really see either person, dominating throughout. I think Molina is very talented. I think Aori Kilang is very talented as well. I think a guy like Roberson makes sense in a situation like that because if he's going to win, Jason, he needs to prevent the takedowns from Brendan Allen because on the feet, Brendan Allen just got TKO'd against Sean Strickland. So obviously Brendan Allen's aware of that and wants to minimize damage. So he'll be shooting for his life. And I think a guy like Carl Roberson could be in a sneaky spot today.
I mentioned a super chat we got from Samuel. Appreciate you, Samuel. Check it in here. He says, is Pete going full with his article picks?
No. So like for GPPs and all that, like what I do is in a 150 max, I'm in a 150 max today. I do about a third of my 150. So I do 50, maybe 75 lineups just based off my own intel, my own gut, my own combinations, my own groups. And then I start to get different for the remaining 75 or 50, depending. And then, I like to take randomness into consideration only for like a small majority because I like to depend a lot of my analysis and a lot of my lineup creation based on my own judgment. But obviously, if you're in a 150 max, you have to get different. So instead of creating combinations manually, it's nice to use a tool like Fantasy Cruncher over on Awesemo. We talk about it all the time. It's really helped me out in all DFS sports, and I highly recommend you guys check it out.
One of the things I use Cruncher a lot for is just to kind of see after I put in my projections and all the, the uniques and the randomness that I put in is I just like to see what it spits out. Sometimes I'll ask for 500 lineups.
Yeah.
And then once I do that, then I go into sort it and I'll sort it based on highest projections. I'll sort it in terms of amount of salary. Like someone asked me earlier, like, what's the least amount of salary or the most amount of salary you left on the table? I said it was $500. And as we always say, in MMA, it can be good to leave some money on the table if you can. So Cruncher's a great thing, just, because I do hand build a lot of my lines, because I do like to play in single entries, 3 max, things along those lines, but I do like to play in 20 max as well. Matthew brings up a popular question we always talk about here on Live for Lock, the fight that is flying under the radar. And is it Sabatini Connolly?
I think in that fight, right? Like, I'm so bullish on Sabatini that I think it's really one-sided. I don't really see. I know Tristan Connolly's talented and could provide some resistance throughout the fight, but for me, a fight that's kind of flying under the radar that I think is interesting for GPPs is the Baccarel-Natividad fight. And a lot of people will automatically pivot from Natividad because they know that he just got knocked out against Miles Johnson. But let's think about it. Was up a weight class, taking a fight on short notice, has a grappling and wrestling, base and skill set to make fights interesting. Baccarel was, in some of his losses, was controlled in the grappling department. But Baccarel does have phenomenal power for the division, and Natividad was just knocked out. So I really like this matchup from a GPP perspective of getting different and having one fighter from this. If you're looking for a couple of your lineups, 20 to 30% of your lineups to get different.
Someone mentioned about Masvidal ownership being wild to him. Do you think he's massively underowned? I would not say he's massively underowned. Look, I think that there is a lot of people who, and we do this in DFS, where you got to play with your brain and not your heart. I think there's a lot of people that are hoping that Jorge Masvidal baptizes Kamaru Usman tonight. Let's just be honest about it. There's a lot of people who want to see Masvidal go out there and knock out Kamaru Usman, but I think we both know the likelihood is that's not going to happen, and that we're going to see a Kamaru Usman win here. But there's no doubt about it. I will tell you this. I am taking some flyers on Jorge Masvidal, obviously, especially on the DraftKings side of the equation. He makes, putting in a 6,800 Jorge Masvidal makes roster construction so much easier.
Yeah, so for me, like, if I look at the underdogs, Masvidal, Namajunas, Andraj, if I eliminate Namajunas from my pool, because we've talked about her so much, say I think that Weili Zhang's going to dominate her, right? Now I'm left with Jessica Andraj or Jorge Masvidal. And I will tell you, a popular pick will be Jessica Andraj, right? Like, I think a lot of people see what she's done and she's capable of, if, high volume striking, tons of takedowns and all that. But I think I like Masvidal from a sneaky perspective a little bit more than the public, just because of if he's able to make it interesting and he does have power in those hands. And if it is mostly on the feet and it's a completely different fight than what we're thinking of. So, like, I have Masvidal on, I think, like 15% of my lineups or something like that, just because in 150 max, you got to get different.
In my 20 max, I was a little higher than that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I was like 25%.
Okay. Wow. It's pretty high.
Look, I mean, like, if he connects, the one thing I will tell you that did concern me, I was watching this clip on the ESPN MMA Instagram last night. I'm not sure if it was a clip. There was a clip I sent you, but it's Kamaru Usman, and I think maybe you put it in our Slack channel of him working on those foot stomps. Did you notice the huge knee brace he has on?
Yeah, and I was just listening to an interview before I came on here, and I wonder, a guy that's taken so many beatings, not even beatings, because he's been dominant in his career, but like the wear and tear on his body through his wrestling career is pretty known. I would wonder if he retires early than we're thinking, kind of like leaves out on top, similar to Khabib, has money. Maybe we never, because, after the Masvidal money grab fight tonight, I don't know if he really wants to run the rematch against Colby Covington because of the work rate and how, he did have a dominant performance at, towards the end. But I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if Usman said, you know what, I'm going to call it a career because of my knee.
Colby is in Jacksonville tonight. Dana White has already said he's getting the winner of this fight, which, well, never believe anything Dana White says because he's a promoter. Promoters lie. I know that's just not breaking news at all, but that's just the reality. Of course, this is Live for Lock. We are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. With Monkey Knife Fight, you are in charge. Head over to monkeyknifefight.com, sign up, use that promo code Awesemo for an instant first match deposit of up to $100. Of course, we did a Monkey Knife Fight show that was premiered yesterday here on the Awesemo YouTube channel. So as myself and Pete broke down some of the lines that are over there, I'll be heading over and playing a little on Monkey Knife Fight here once we get done with the show. KCMO over in our premium Slack channel says thoughts on Selekic as a dog.
Yeah.
Maybe Dwight Grant is the guy that, you know what, maybe we're not talking about enough of him as well. Maybe this ultimately could be the fight that maybe is the slate breaker.
Okay, so let's talk about this. And what's up, KCMO? Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. So Dwight Grant is 9,200, Jason. Like 9,200 is a little nuts, especially when you have, 3 title fights on there. I like Usman better than Grant. I like Shevchenko better. Even Zhang Wei Li better. It's interesting, right? Like Grant is flying completely under the radar and is going up against a guy who just popped for PEDs. So we don't really know how Sekulic's skill set has been affected by the PEDs. Like, was his success predominantly because he was on steroids or something of the sort? Is it, just kind of like a coincidence or something new that he tried? We don't know, but I do think that Sekulic is an interesting underdog. I have him in my pool. I didn't prioritize getting exposure to him, and if I kind of landed on him, I was fine with it. He does have a sneaky ground game and some tricky striking, throws a lot of question mark kicks, which can definitely, break through the guard of Dwight Grant. But this fight to me seems like a slower pace fight and kind of just like maybe not optimal. So I took like an underweight approach to the fight, but I was over my exposure for Sekulic than the public.
Question from Tristan about Randy Brown or Ariane Carnelossi. I prefer to go to Randy Brown aspect.
Did you see the weigh-in yesterday with Cowboy Oliveira, like the stare down and then starts talking to him and then walks off? What the heck was that about? Anyways, I don't know what to make of Cowboy Oliveira at this point, right? Like when he goes and he decides to, he gets pissed off and he decides to start throwing hands or takedowns, he has GPP potential. And I will tell you, I got to a lot of Cowboy Oliveira because of the potential. I understand the volatility surrounding that, but I can't trust Cowboy Oliveira because he can gas out at any moment. He can give up a submission pretty easily. When he's met with resistance, he kind of crumbles. So it makes me like Randy Brown quite a bit. My only fear for the Randy Brown Carnelossi, pick would be maybe Carnelossi's not able to get rid of Na Liang. Maybe she's not able to get her out of there. And it's a dominant performance, but, doesn't really meet expectations and is around the 85 to 90 point range.
The Super Monkey 22 says, would you rather roster Natividad or Connolly in a DraftKings single entry?
Yeah, it's Natividad for me. And I understand if you're hesitant, but we also have to take the weight classes into consideration. Becquerel definitely hits hard. But the lower the weight classes, traditionally, the lower amount of finishes. It's just how it is. 135 pounds. I think if Natividad strikes with Becquerel, then he's susceptible to getting knocked out for sure. I think if he closes the distance and tests his wrestling, that's where things could get interesting. Plus, you talk about a fighter coming out of Fight Ready, cross-training over there. I really like that, and I understand that team is like one of the notable teams in MMA right now.
By the way, speaking of underdogs, I don't know if you saw this, 3 underdogs come in last night on the PFL. If you would have parlayed them 3 together, which would have been Clay Collard, Marcin Held, and Bubba Jenkins, the parlay was plus 8,500.
Who did Marcin Held fight? Natan Schultz? Is that who he fought?
Yeah.
Wow, he beat him? I only caught the Bubba
I
Jenkins.
would tell you this. Marcin Held's striking has grown leaps and bounds.
He's just not a grappler anymore.
It was all striking from him. He was crisp on the feet. It just shows, and we talk about this all the time, of just how fighters evolve. And, and you have to always kind of watch fight to fight to see kind of what they're doing. And like that last night was just a perfect example of a fighter who just has grown so much from his, from what the guy that we saw in Bellator and the UFC into where he's at now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing about MMA. It's unpredictable for so many reasons. We talk about it all the time, but you have to take into the X factor, which is evolution. And you don't really know how a fighter's going to evolve from fight to fight, who they're training with, the switches of camps, the training partners, all that makes a difference. But, I was really impressed with Collard, last night. I knew that he has some crazy hands, and he put it on Pettis, which was a lot of fighters leaving the UFC not having the best debuts in other promotions. And, Eddie Alvarez is a name that kind of sticks out to me too.
Caleb saying that he had a Collard hell parlay. Good job on that one. That was a nice one. Both plus 300 underdogs in that one. But yeah, that was kind of a crazy night there in terms of the PFL. Single entry in terms of Pat and Baccarat. This is one thing we got to talk about Baccarat is he's had one of his coaches is not there now. Brandon Gibson out of Jackson Wink. He posted on social media that he tested positive for COVID. He's vaccinated. So that is something to kind of watch for. You would have to imagine if there was something where the fight may not happen, we would know hopefully before lock.
That was my initial thoughts, right? When I saw that and then I sent it to you, I was like, okay, well, it's Baccarat's main striking coach. How is Baccarat going on? Like, how is he not affected by this? Like, legitimately. Just because he tested negative, I guess. I don't know. If you're rostering Baccarat, just kind of keep your eyes peeled to Twitter and whatnot. And hopefully we don't get a last minute cancellation. That's the only thing that I could think.
Ryan, Masvidal has little chance of stopping Usman's takedowns. Well, he stopped 11 of them in their first matchup, so he can stop them.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought too, right? Like I thought Usman has like this Habib, you can't stop, I'm just going to chain wrestle, and he does. But I mean, his takedown accuracy only at 47% really shocked me.
Yeah. Next up, goes, am I crazy or is Weidman getting KO'd again? I mean, look, I think if the fight plays out on the feet, yeah, I would expect that is a good likelihood to happen, but I got to imagine that this entire camp has been about wrestling.
Yeah, and I don't really know if it's more on Weidman than it is for Hall. Like, I think, like, this fight, how the result happens is going to be based off of what Hall does in the matchup, right? Like, if he puts his back to the cage and isn't the aggressor and allows Weidman to try to implement wrestling and just tries to defend, I think that's a recipe for Chris Weidman to succeed. But if he goes out there, stands his ground, hits Weidman with a big shot early to get his respect, and starts to try to test that chin of his early instead of waiting for Weidman to come to him, it's a GPP fight for sure, and I split my exposure. But I think that Hall's knocking him out.
You mentioned about Cowboy a little earlier, and Gavin throwing sentiments to what you said. Cowboy's a wild card as it gets. Yes. 30% of the time, he flat out doesn't show. He's a GPP only play, but can't doubt the upside. I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like a head case, and I just don't understand how serious he takes his training. We've seen great moments from him. He has some nice wins. But when he looks bad, boy, does he look bad. So that's another GPP fight that I definitely prioritize. Now, you know what, Jason? We're not talking about a fighter that is one of my favorite on the slate. Can you guess who it is? And it's nobody in the title fight.
Your favorite fighter?
One of them. Not my favorite. Easy.
God, I'm trying to think of our conversations. Who would be in a Pete top 3 list?
It's like a top 5. I'm really I like him a lot today.
I'm going to say it's Carl Roberson.
I have a decent amount of Carl Roberson, but a fighter that I really like is Jimmy Crute. I really do.
All right. Let me play a little devil's advocate here for you.
Please do.
What happens if the fight hits the second round?
I think he just keeps beating the heck out of Anthony Smith. No, it's a great question.
That to me is the question mark I have on Jimmy Crute. I mean, look, he's a finisher. You look up and down that resume, and I see a bunch of ones. That's a great thing to see. But I do wonder is if Anthony Smith shows durability and he can drag this fight into the late second, early third round, is Jimmy Crute going to be the same guy that we've seen in the first round, or will we see a Jimmy Crute that starts to wear down? Anthony Smith use that veteran aspect of him and what he knows and all the tricks he knows, and maybe it's a late finish for Anthony Smith. Just playing devil's advocate. I think Jimmy Crute's the right way to play on the fight, no question about it. But I think my question marks with Jimmy Crute is, A, it's the toughest fight of his career. It's a massive step up in competition from who he's been facing before, and the question mark of what happens if the fight goes out of the first round.
Yeah, I think it's all legitimate concerns, right? Like, and I have Anthony Smith, and I think he's going to be a very, very popular, if not one of the most popular underdogs on the slate for good reason, because of his resume, who he's fought. I mean, he was beat up by Glover Teixeira for 5 rounds and then finished late. But he has next level toughness, right? Like, he really does. So I think a finish over Anthony Smith would be a huge feather in Jimmy Crute's cap. I'm not predicting a finish. I'm predicting a dominant performance via takedowns, strikes, control time, all of that. And at his price discount, slight discount, $8,900, I think that he's in this. What's the fighter? Austin Hubbard, that was at $8,900 last week, that had a sneaky score because he wasn't a 9,000 fighter.
Well, we always talk about this, Pete, of on the DraftKings side of the equation of who is that fighter like from 84 to 8,900 that you feel like, okay, might be able to get a little bit of a leverage spot because everyone's looking at those 9,000 plus fighters. In this situation, everyone's looking at those title fights that you might be able to get leverage on the field. I know there was a question earlier or a comment earlier in the chat that was basically like, look, I'm fading the fights in a GPP. And I don't think that's a bad thought process. It's going to differentiate yourself from the field. But the problem is with those 5-round fights, and I know someone was asking about our top fighters tool and some fighters not being in the top 6. It's because of those title fights being 25 minutes where if you told me all 3 title fights go 25 minutes, I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah, no, I a lot of times when a fight is so evenly matched, that's when you see fighters win 3 rounds to 2 and it goes the distance. I can see that happening in the main event for sure. I can see Shevchenko possibly blanking Andraj en route to a big score. And I can see Namajunas and Weili Zhang being largely competitive. We talk about which fighters going overlooked in that mid-range, right? And if I'm glancing at that mid-range between, let's call it 8,300 and 8,900, there's a fighter there that doesn't have a box score, and that fighter is Pat Sabatini. And if you are a casual listener or a casual player, you will probably not roster Pat Sabatini because he does not have any stats for you to go off of. He's an unknown. He's a wild card. And I think he's a sneaky play in that range. Good striker, BJJ black belt. Tristan Connolly looked emaciated at the weigh-ins. He really did, but he's a tough fighter. I think like Jimmy Crute is one of my most interesting players that I've included because of the Kamaru Usman potential, in the fight at a slight discount.
I'll give you a great story about Tristan Connolly.
Okay.
A man was going to do an interview with me from the airport.
For this fight?
Yes. We were talking with his management on Monday, and they're like, oh, well, Tristan's flying. He'll do the interview from the airport. I'm like, how about we catch up after the fight? Let him do his show. Yeah, well, a man was going to do an interview from the airport.
With a mask on and everything. Man. Yeah, I mean, he's committed, right? Like, that's interesting. That's the cool thing about this show, guys. Like, we enjoy discussing fights with you. You guys are so intelligent in the fight game, and you guys pose some great questions. And between the two of us, we can come up with some educated answers for you guys. And if you appreciate what we have going on here, you can just hit that like button, try to get us over 150 likes. We appreciate it. We're here for another about 10 or so minutes. And, if you have any more questions, shoot them in chat, please.
Of course, we've mentioned about that great promo we got going on. Promo code UFC261, get 50% off a Awesemo Plus MMA monthly pass that does expire today. Take advantage of that. You will get the show with 5 UFC events, so be sure to check that out. Of course, also, when you are a member of Awesemo Plus, it does give you access to our premium Slack account where you can sit there, chat with me. You can, hey, if you want to DM me, you can DM me on Slack. I'll get to you with whatever your question may be. And of course, every Saturday about 2 hours before the show, I go into the office hours channel and start asking questions. It starts answering your questions. So be sure to check out that. And the one thing about me and Pete when it comes to DFS for MMA, we're not looking at it from an analytical side. We're looking at it from a fight side, just because, you know, we're knee deep into the fight business. I mean, we're definitely looking at the fight aspect and how these things can play out. Gavin had a comment that just got me cracking up. Friends don't let friends bet on Anthony Smith.
Man, right? Like I know, like, he's been very hard to trust, and he let me down in that Glover Teixeira fight. And if, you know, my girlfriend's a big Anthony Smith fan, and over the years, she's really said to me, like, his body's looking different. It's almost like he's not, I don't know if he's not lifting weights or he's not training. He just looks soft. Like, he looks like he's just not the same physical specimen. I don't know if it's because he's getting older. I don't know if it's because he's been getting beaten up in some of his losses. He just does not look the same. And I didn't think he looked the best at the weigh-ins.
Yeah, it's funny comment there. Funny comment there. Let's see here. Thoughts on stacking Rose and Weili fight in a DraftKings single entry and fading the other 2 title fights?
I don't know about that, man. I don't know about that.
I think, okay, let me, here's how that would work. You need high volume and you need Rose takedowns and a Rose win. I think that's the only way stacking that fight makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, stacking
if it's a straight up 25-minute striking fight, no, thank you.
I think the reason I wish there was a title fight on here, 8,200, 8,000, because then I would say, you know what, stacking makes a ton of sense. But when you're paying high and low for a fighter, you need the high fighter, the high price fighter, in that case would be Weili Zhang, to come through, and you still need the underdog to score well. So I don't know.
Oh man, my man Jared just throwing a little dagger at you, Pete. Did you see the comment?
Yeah, hey, I see it. I understand. My girl likes Anthony Smith. I can't do it. What do you want me to do? It's Anthony Smith. I can't hate on the guy.
If you had to roster 2 fighters from a title fight, which 2 make the most sense in a GPP?
Okay, so if I'm being safe, then I would say Shevchenko Usman.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
The problem is when you're doing that, now you're talking about on a DraftKings equation, that's a 9,500 fighter and a 9,400 fighter. That becomes a problem. I think a popular on GPP will be Rose and Usman. To me, if you tell me pick 2, Usman's immediately who I'm going to. I might go Weili just because I think everyone's so high on Rose.
Okay, so you're thinking from a leverage perspective. I like it.
I mean, because people, I think, are obviously looking at the salary savings of going to Rose, which may open up the door for Weili in terms of an ownership.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and that's why I like, you know, playing devil's advocate, you and I on this show. Like, you look at it from a different way than I do, and I do like that. And I think that Rose will be a chalky underdog. So have her in some, but be okay with getting different.
Question is, could you rock the overalls?
Hell no. Somebody said that. Somebody said something like, you know, look at that. I forget what they said to me about me wearing overalls or something. Like, I mean, I don't know what that outfit or that attire was about. It was the weirdest thing ever, but I mean, Rose is a little unique.
Come on, we know you love your sweatpants. They just don't roll with the overalls.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no.
Yeah, if you follow Pete on Instagram, you'll pretty much notice Pete's got a big collection of sweatpants that he trains in.
Bro, I have like 20 pairs of sweatpants because like I'm always trying to cut weight and get these COVID pounds off me.
Hey, you're getting there. You're getting there. Yeah, you know, that June number is coming up here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Just saying, you might be getting a phone call early on in the week going, are we doing June or what?
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
You got that decision's coming up. Let's see here. If you have Usman, Valentina, and Rose, are you going to have to leave money on the table in order to be unique?
Yeah, I would say naturally, yes. Like I've left a lot of money on the table.
Yeah, I think in a lineup that I had them in, I left $200 or $300 on the table.
I have lineups where I've left quite a bit out there. I mean, if more underdogs come through than what most are predicting, you're going to need to leave a lot on the table.
Yeah. Why is Connolly such a big underdog? I think it's going down in weight. I think it's how high people view Pat Sabatini is another aspect of that.
Yeah, I mean, champion, BJJ black belt, decent striker, coming from Renzo Gracie Philly. Outside of having an injury in a fight in CFFC, he's been pretty dominant throughout his career.
Next up, Brent Allen or Batrigal. I like Brent Allen if this is all caps, if he gets this fight to the ground. But I am definitely concerned about him getting knocked out.
I have concerns about both guys. I think I have more concerns about Brendan Allen than I do Baccarel. I think the safer play would be Baccarel, KO guy, facing a guy who's just KO'd. But I think Brendan Allen has tons of potential.
Yeah. Of course, be sure to subscribe to Awesemo right here on YouTube. We got a ton of great shows for you. Of course, coming up after us is NBA Deeper Dive. Spags and the boss man Alex help you get ready for tonight's NBA slate. And of course, right after them, we'll be live before lock. So keep it locked here to Awesemo. Make sure you hit that subscribe. And look, if you subscribe to us and you don't like it, well, it's really easy. All you gotta do is hit unsubscribe. But of course, hit that notification bell. And of course, Pete's looking for 150 likes. We're just about there. Help him get to 150 likes. It helps his ego out a lot. Pete's got a big ego. Well, I do too.
Yeah,
I ain't gonna deny that one.
No, we just appreciate the support, right? Like I enjoy talking about fights. I enjoy helping people make money. If you guys win some money, tag us in some screenshots on Twitter at Pete the Heat MMA, at Jason_Floyd. You ever have questions about anything? Don't be afraid to reach out. All right, we're not big shots or anything, so we'd love to take your questions.
Brent mentioned, he goes, I haven't heard a fight stack strategy work in a while. Usually when they do work, it's a smaller slate, 9-10 fights, or a Max Holloway fight. The one that sticks out to me is him versus Volkanovski. That's worked as a stack.
Yeah, that is true. That was a crazy fight, right? It also depends on salary. Like salary makes stacking viable on some cards and some cards not so much.
Of course, if you do have any questions, you can always hit us up in the Premium Slack channel for our Awesemo subscribers. Also, be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at Jason_Floyd. He is at Pete the Heat MMA. Let's end on this question before we turn things over to NBA Deeper Dive. Is it wise to fade Valentina?
I don't think it's wise. No, I think it is extremely bold to fade Valentina. I really have a lot of hopes for her tonight.
Yeah, that's a very bold move. Of course, coming up next is NBA Deeper Dive with Spags and Alex. Do want to thank our sponsor, Monkey Knife Fight. Be sure to use that promo code Awesemo when you sign up for an instant first match deposit up to $100. Good luck to everyone tonight, and be sure to send us those winning lineups following tonight's UFC 261. Good luck, everyone.